A few days after moving into my new home, the doorbell rang loudly. When I unlocked the door, it was suddenly pushed open.
Hey, if your new house is ready, you should have invited us sooner.
It was my mother-in-law, Linda, peeking her face through the doorway. Behind her was my husband, Steve. She pushed past me, and Linda entered the house without permission.
A house with a yard? Quite fancy for your usual taste. You're usually a worthless wife who can't even do chores. But I guess you're good for something every now and then. Now, where's my room? This one looks like it gets good sunlight. Maybe I'll take it.
I barely held back my laughter at Linda's self-satisfied words. Must be very nice not having much in your head. We're not even related anymore. There's no room for you here.
What? How could you say such a terrible thing to a family? If you apologize now, I'll forgive you. But if you don't, we'll get divorced.
Steve yelled, his face bright red, while Linda had a smug grin on her face. How ridiculous, thinking such threats could work on me. I sighed and then pulled out this little something. As soon as they saw it, both Linda and Steve froze.
You didn't.
Divorce? What are you talking about? I'm single. My name is Susan. I met Steve in college, and we've been married for 5 years now. He pursued me relentlessly, and we got together, but our marriage turned out to be a little different from what I had imagined. Steve was what you'd call a mama's boy, where his mother Linda's opinion always came first. Even for small decisions, he'd say, "I'll check with my mom," and he always took Linda's advice. From picking our honeymoon destination to choosing a family dentist, even the color of the bedroom curtains. He asked Linda about everything and always chose whatever she suggested. Despite being bothered by Steve's obsession with his mom's opinions, I chose to ignore it. After all, while our married life wasn't perfect, it wasn't all bad either. Steve would complain, but he still helped out with simple chores like taking out the trash. We'd go out to dinner and travel together on weekends. He never forgot to get me a gift on birthdays or anniversaries. And aside from Linda, I thought Steve was a pretty good husband. So, I didn't make a big deal out of it and just carried on with married life. But after Steve's father passed away, things started to change. Our marriage, which had been going relatively well, began to unravel.
Susan, can we talk for a sec?
What is it? What's wrong? Steve asked me this one evening after he got home from work, barely touching his dinner.
How would you feel about my mom moving in with us?
Huh? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Where is this coming from?
It's nothing out of the blue. I've been thinking about it ever since Dad passed. Mom's all alone now, and it's hard for her to live by herself. I'm worried about her.
To be honest, I don't like that idea. Linda's still healthy and fully capable of living on her own. It's not even a 20-minute drive from here to her place. Can't we just visit her like we've been doing?
No, that won't work. Even though she seems fine, you never know what could happen. What if something happens to her and no one's there to help? What if it's too late when someone finds her? Could you live with that in your conscience?
Well,
See, I don't want that to happen to my mom. If you're against it, then I'm considering divorce.
it's that serious to you?
I'm dead serious.
Okay. Let me think about it. After several discussions, we ended up agreeing to live with Linda. Linda was always interfering with Steve, and Steve followed her every word. Living with the two of them didn't seem like it would turn out well, but at the time, I was pregnant. I figured it would be better for the baby to have a father around, so I reluctantly agreed to let Linda move in. Plus, I thought that my relationship with Steve wouldn't change just because we'd be living with his mom. I believed in the time Steve and I had spent together. But reality wasn't that simple. As soon as we started living together, Linda began what you call typical mother-in-law bullying. Instead of being considerate of my pregnancy, she dumped all the housework on me and spent her days out with friends from morning until evening. When she came back, she would nitpick my chores. During times when I wasn't feeling well, the cleaning and cooking would naturally be kept simple. I tried my best to explain to her, thinking she'd understand since she'd been through pregnancy herself. But Linda didn't listen and just talked over me.
This is why young people these days are hopeless. Back when I was younger, I got everything done, even when I wasn't feeling well. Look at this mess. There's still water stains. The ironing is half done, and the meals aren't balanced. Are you trying to starve me and my precious son?
There were days when I had to redo the chores, despite my poor health. When I couldn't take it anymore and complained to Steve, he always took Linda's side.
Sure, Mom can be harsh sometimes, but it's your fault for not doing the housework properly, Susan. Don't blame it on her.
But there are days when I can barely stand. Expecting perfection on those days is just too much.
Well, Mom managed to do it while pregnant with me, so there's no reason you can't. You're just being lazy, Susan.
Everyone's pregnancy is different, and besides, Linda's out playing from morning till night. This apartment was originally ours, and she's not even contributing to the household expenses. Can't you at least ask her to help with some chores until I'm feeling better?
Come on, Susan. You agreed to live with Mom in the first place. If you've got complaints now, we can always get divorced, you know?
Steve seemed confident I wouldn't leave him. He gave me a smug smile, which made me want to sigh in frustration. He never used to say things like this before we lived together. Honestly, with Linda's bullying, my poor health, and Steve's attitude, I was starting to get tired of our marriage. Then, one day, as usual, Linda went out with her friends, and I was left alone at home to do the housework. I was feeling better than usual, so I made sure to do everything extra carefully, thinking today would be perfect. But just as Linda returned home, she let out a loud scream. "Linda, what's wrong?"
What's wrong? My clothes are ruined.
"What? I did the laundry the same way I always do."
These are delicate clothes. They need to be hand washed. How could you just toss them in the machine with everything else? Look at this mess. This was my favorite, and now it's ruined. What are you going to do about it?
"But Linda, you didn't say anything about it."
What are you on about? You should have known better without me telling you.
Linda was completely irrational at this point. Just then, Steve came home from work.
I'm home. What's going on here?
"Welcome back."
Steve, Susan ruined my favorite clothes. They were expensive too.
Linda ran to Steve, cutting me off.
These are the ones you wear a lot, right?
Steve glanced at me as he took the clothes from Linda.
Susan, can't you even manage simple chores like laundry?
But Linda didn't say anything, and the clothes were in the regular laundry basket, not the hand wash basket. Sure, I should have double-checked, but Linda shares the blame too.
What? Are you saying this is my fault?
I've been ignoring your behavior up until now. But if you're going to insult my mom, this time it's divorce for sure. I don't need a wife who can't do housework. Get out.
With that, Steve pulled out a piece of paper from his bag. It was a divorce application, with Steve's section already filled out. He slammed it onto the dining table, grinning at me like he was enjoying this, like it was some kind of test.
For your own sake, you'd better think carefully and change your attitude.
With that, Steve started to leave, taking Linda with him. Wait, where are you going?
We're going out to eat. I'm not feeding Mom that cold, disgusting food. And I'm not eating it either.
With that, Steve walked out. Linda followed behind him, glancing at me sideways. She looked at me with a smug, triumphant expression. I had been putting up with this for so long, all for the sake of the baby inside me. However, whenever I remembered Linda's triumphant face and Steve's mocking expression, I felt an overwhelming sense of anger and sadness. Steve had always put Linda first, but he was never someone who mocked me like this. How did things end up this way? I was at a loss, staring at the divorce papers left on the table. Just then, my phone, which had been sitting in my pocket, vibrated. When I checked, it was a call from my mother.
Hello, Susan. It's been a while. How are you doing?
Mom, it's been a while.
You haven't visited or called us at all lately, so your dad and I have been worried.
Sorry, I've been a bit busy, but I'm doing okay.
Well, that's good to hear.
Hearing my mom's cheerful voice for the first time in a while made my throat tighten. Before I knew it, tears started to fall from my eyes. Mom, I can't.
Susan, what's wrong? Did something happen?
I couldn't hold back the sobs anymore, and I could hear the concern in my mom's voice. I had reached my limit. The emotions I had been suppressing for so long finally broke free. I told my mom everything that had been happening. After listening to everything, my mom was more shocked and angrier than I was.
It's okay if you get divorced. If you're worried about raising the baby, we'll be here for you. Your dad and I have raised a child before. Look how well you've turned out. Just think of it like you're on a safe boat.
My mom said playfully. She was probably trying to make sure I didn't feel guilty about relying on them.
Actually, this might be good timing.
Ah?
Your dad and I are thinking about building a new house. That's why I called today.
I was momentarily confused by her unexpected words. She happily started talking about the details of the house they planned to build. It was going to be a 2-story house with a yard. Despite her excited, almost childlike tone, they had already planned out the land, the layout, and even the costs. It seemed like all that was left was to sign the contract and start construction.
Why don't you come live with us?
What?
If you're getting divorced, you'll need a new place to live. And with all the worries that come with pregnancy and childbirth, wouldn't it be better to stay with us? We can help out after the baby is born, too.
I felt a little guilty at the idea of relying on my parents at this age, but I was also incredibly grateful. Having quit my jobs because of the pregnancy, I wasn't confident I could find a new home so quickly. On top of that, I was pregnant. I couldn't imagine staying calm if I were living alone and suddenly went into labor. So I gratefully accepted my mom's offer and decided to move into the new house with them. Still, feeling a bit guilty, I offered to put some of the money I had saved from working before the pregnancy toward the down payment on the house. Over the next few months, I quietly worked on the divorce paperwork, making sure neither Steve nor Linda would find out. Once I decided to get divorced, a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I didn't care what they said to me anymore. Linda, maybe feeling victorious that I had become more submissive, grew even harsher and more demanding. Steve, instead of stopping her, continued to ride Linda's coattails and treated me like a servant. Any lingering attachment or affection I had left for Steve vanished completely over those months. While still living with them, I frequently visited my parents' house, using various excuses, and prepared for the move. It was fun shopping for new furniture for the house and baby items for the little one on the way with my parents. Linda wasn't around to laugh at my poor taste in furniture, and she couldn't throw unnecessary expensive items into the shopping cart. I had almost forgotten how enjoyable stress-free shopping could be. I felt excited thinking about my new life. When the construction of the new house was finished and it was finally time to move, I submitted the divorce papers to the courthouse. These were the same papers that Steve had left on the table the day we argued about Linda's clothes. After they left, I picked it up and kept it safe. I thought it might come in handy someday. At first, I had intended to sit down and have a proper conversation about divorce since, despite everything, we had once been a relatively happy couple. However, seeing Linda gleefully making unreasonable demands every day, and Steve not only failing to stand up for me, but joining in with Linda, telling me divorce over and over again, I decided to leave without saying a word. A few days before the move, I submitted the divorce papers and they were officially processed, making me a free, single woman. With that weight off my shoulders, I moved into the new house with my parents and began enjoying my new life. But then we had some unexpected visitors.
Hey, Susan, if you've moved in, you should have called us sooner.
Yeah, we're family. Why didn't you invite us?
Somehow, Linda and Steve had found out about my new home and showed up unannounced. Before I could even say anything, they pushed their way into the house.
A house with a yard. This is surprisingly nice for you, Susan. Now, where's my room?
They were excitedly looking around.
I mean, you're a useless wife who can't even do chores, but you've outdone yourself this time.
Linda said cheerfully, but I managed to hold back my laughter. Neither Linda nor Steve had the slightest idea that we were no longer married. Actually, I'm no longer your wife.
What are you talking about, Susan?
We're still married. And as long as we are, you're still Mom's daughter-in-law.
I'm single, so that makes us strangers. I'd appreciate it if you both left.
What are you saying?
The divorce papers were processed at the courthouse the other day. So, Steve, we're not married anymore. I was planning to send you a letter about it soon, but I didn't expect you to show up here. Since I hadn't expected them to visit the new house, I didn't want them to keep thinking we were still married. So, on the day I moved, I sent a letter informing them of the divorce with a specified delivery date. If everything went as planned, the letter should arrive tomorrow. Steve, not believing me, smiled nervously and walked toward me.
Susan, I don't know why you're mad, but I'll apologize. Come on, let's make up. There's no need to make up stories about a divorce. You've just been avoiding me because you're upset, right? I'll apologize too. Then we can all make up, and Mom will forgive you too.
There's nothing to forgive. We're already divorced. I pulled out the divorce certificate from the drawer and showed it to them. Steve stared at it, his face slowly turning pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish.
What? When did this happen? I don't even remember signing any divorce papers.
You did, on the day we argued about Linda's clothes. You left the completed papers on the table, remember?
That's not valid.
Maybe not, if that was the only evidence. But you told me you wanted a divorce every day, and so did Linda. I've been recording everything you two said, and I've kept a diary. That counts as evidence too. I played a recording from my phone's voice recorder. In it, Linda could be heard saying, "This food is terrible, the worst in the world," and Steve saying, If you're going to serve this, we should get a divorce. Steve and Linda were frozen in shock. So, since we're no longer family, please leave immediately. I didn't say you could come in, and if you don't leave, I'll call the police. At that, they both turned pale and hurriedly left the house. After seeing them off, I locked the door securely, making sure they couldn't come back. Apparently, after hearing that my parents and I had bought the new house, Linda and Steve had sold their old house and given notice to vacate the apartment they had been living in. I heard they struggled quite a bit to find a new place. Their life together after I left didn't seem to be going well. Linda, who had dumped all the housework on me, still refused to do chores, leaving Steve to handle everything, though he wasn't used to it. On top of that, Linda had been bragging to relatives and friends.
We're moving into a luxury new house, so come visit.
But the truth was, they'd moved into a regular apartment, far from luxurious, and people had started gossiping about her lies. Because of the stress, she started taking it out on Steve more often. With me gone, Steve became her only outlet, and they frequently ended up in shouting matches. As for me, I'm now living in peace with my healthy baby boy and my parents in the new house. With my parents' full support, I plan to return to work once my son is a bit older. My goal is to create a happy, peaceful home where my son can grow up strong and healthy. Every day, I work hard at parenting filled with joy and peace.